Right, so I'm going to get into putting this junkers together. Obviously, I'm going to be leaving the crew out, probably leaving the machine guns off as well. So I'm just going to start by just adding the seats in and just doing the cockpit bit. I'll probably paint this when it's all together. So I'm going to get the fuselage glued together, then start looking at these wings. I'm probably going to glue the wings on. I've been looking at plenty of pictures and they seem to break along this area here, so the other side to where the engine is, and then I'm thinking of also cutting the engine off here as well and having that just a few feet away, you know, covered in static grass, sort of half buried. Try and bend the props a little bit later on in this video. So yeah, get the wing in, get it cut off. Hopefully that'll look quite convincing. I'm going to leave these positioned right down as if they've just sort of sagged down over time. I found some interesting pictures where the tail section's really damaged and there's actual panels missing. So I'm going to leave the rudder sort of hanging off really damaged. And as you can see in this picture from the tail section, I've took some inspiration from this. I'm also going to leave a bit of damage on the elevators. Leave these flaps sort of hanging down again as if they've been there a couple of years and they've just sort of naturally dropped over time. So I can get these glued in next. So I'm going to leave the rudder sort of swinging over to one side as, you know, as time's gone on. I don't know, the wind has blown it and it's just starting to fall off. So it's starting to come away at the top. Just think it needs to give it a little bit more interest. So I'm quite pleased with that, quite a cute angle on it. It should just add to the character of the crash site. So working on the props, I decided to warm them up in the oven to about 100 degrees and then left them in there about 5 minutes. And then I've just tried to tweak the props to the side to really sort of replicate a crash landing. I'm quite pleased with how these have came out. I'm going to glue the main part of the engine on, let that dry, cut the engine off, and then I can start doing the camouflage paintwork on the main fuselage itself. Right, so I'm going to start doing the paintwork on it now before I go any further. So I want to do all the camo and all the marking stuff before I cut it up, so then the camo matches each other rather than cut it in separate bits and then try and get the camo to join where it originally was. Before I'm going to do any of that, I'm going to paint it in this silver. And I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but the plan is to paint it all silver first, then put the camo on top. So as if I've got the metal substrate and then my paint on top of that. And then as I scrape paint away or wash it away with IPA and cotton buds and whatever else I intend to do, it should reveal the silver underneath. So it looks like you've got paint over top of metal rather than paint over top of plastic. So I'm going to plastic prime it, give it a couple of coats of this metallic silver, and then start looking at doing the camo. Probably another 24 hours, let that dry. I haven't got the right colours for the model, but I'm going to copy the front of the box. I've got a whole range of Valios and I'm just going to tint them and match them by eye, get them the best I can. Bearing in mind, by the time they're weathered and they're covered in scenery, you know, I can get away with it being a tone out here or there. So I'll get the plastic primer on, get the silver paint on, and then I'll be back in 24 hours. I'm happy with that. That's really made the detail pop. I need to try and lose this join on the top, so I may have to sand that down, fill that, try and improve it before I go on with the camo. But apart from that, that certainly is looking like a nice bit of aluminium now rather than a piece of plastic. So as we all know, aluminium doesn't rust, it corrodes. So what I'm going to do now is I've got some white and a bit of silver paint, and I've got it on a sponge. And I'm going to try and put a texture of corrosion on that's going to go underneath all the camo. And when I start washing the camo back, hopefully it's going to pick up this texture of corrosion. Right, so that's the undercoat done. I'm fairly happy with that. I've seen quite a few alloy wheels that are corroded aluminium, and they certainly get that sort of white flaky corrosion on top of the metal substrate. So I think that will do for my undercoat. I mean, granted, you're not going to see most of this on here anyway, but the idea is the parts where I do break through the camo hopefully will reveal this sort of like mottled silver look that I've tried to achieve. So that's what I'm going to try and mix up now. I'm going to paint the whole thing in the lighter green, and then once that's dry, use the designs out the instructions, possibly mask off, or I might just do it freehand with the airbrush, do the darker colours. So I'm going to try and mix it by eye now with my Vallejo range, get the main one on, and then again leave it another 24 hours at least, really, and then hopefully I can mask on it. These lines look quite neat, and they don't really look like they've got an overspray line, so I think I may mask them rather than airbrush and leave a spraying line on there, but I'll worry about that when I come to it. I'm certainly not going to be worrying about the camo underneath, because this is going to be buried in scenery. Even the stuff that's sat on top of the surface, there's going to be grass coming over these edges anyway, so at least I only need to worry about the top bits of the camo. As far as the glass goes, probably going to smash that with a toffee hammer and then try and glue it all back together individually, sort of in places around the cockpit and the nose cone. But I'll worry about that as usual. I'll worry about that as I get to it. I quite enjoy sort of making it up as I go along. So this is where the fun starts. I'm going to go with this green to begin with. I'm going to add some yellow into it and possibly some black. But I think to get the darker green, I think I'll be using the same colour or the same colour combinations, but just adding the black in it. These colours are quite similar as they are. So I'm going to have a play around with these two. Might need some whites, some of the bits and bobs in it, but I'm going to start with these, see how I get on. Right, so I've got a good colour for the lighter of the two camos. It looks a lot better than that off camera. When I'm looking at it with my own eyes, it doesn't quite look as olive as that. As you can see, that's pretty close. I'm happy. I can live with that. By the time that's weathered, I can live with that. So I'm going to paint that over the whole model now. And then, like I was saying earlier, let that dry and then mask off doing these other bits and bobs. Right, so that's dry now. So I'm going to mark out doing the darker colour. I'm just going to freehand this with the brush, I think. I should be able to get the lines pretty straight. As you can see, now the colour's dry, it's nice and matte, which is pretty good. That's what I needed to start with. You can actually see little areas where I've missed, and you can just see the silver popping through. So that's giving me a bit of confidence that this method might work. So for this colour, I'm going to use the same base colours, but just add black in it. So you can see already I've put the green and the yellow in. I'm here with a bit of brown, dash of black, mix that up, see where I am. So I know this whole tip is the darker colour, so I can just use this as a test. A little bit green still, so I'm going to add a little bit more black into that and then try again till I get the right colour. Okay, so that third one's pretty good. Added a little bit more black, the second one, and then I added some more yellow just to tone it down a little bit. Right, so I followed the camo pattern quite nicely. In fact, we'll have a quick look. There we go. So you can see the German camo is quite square and quite sharp lines, nothing like, you know, say like an A series camo on a Mark 1 Spitfire, where it's quite flowing. There's quite aggressive lines on it. I feel like I've copied that quite well. It's dry now. I've dried it with a hairdryer. This acrylic stuff is really good for speed. You can just dry it off super quick. So I'm going to mix up some water and some IPA, and with some cotton buds, I'm going to have a little test on a wingtip. See what it's like as I start washing it back. See if I can get that silver sort of breaking through in areas.